What if your last words could change the course of history? Brian Wilson lay on the sterile hospital bed, his breath shallow, eyes flickering between consciousness and the fading light. The beeping machines around him marked the relentless ticking of time, each second a reminder of the end drawing near. His daughter, Emily, sat close by, gripping his trembling hand. They hadn't spoken in years, but now, with the weight of his final moments pressing down, Brian summoned the strength to whisper a request so strange, so urgent, it left Emily breathless. "Find Elon, deliver this," he said, passing her a small metallic device wrapped in worn cloth. Emily's heart hammered with disbelief and confusion. Why Elon Musk? And what was this device her father, a once celebrated tech innovator, was desperate to entrust to one of the most powerful men in the world? The hospital room was thick with unspoken tension as the fading light cast long shadows across Brian's gaunt face. Emily's mind raced, tangled with memories of her father's distant gaze through her childhood, the late nights filled with whispered promises that never materialized, the sacrifices she'd made to build a life outside his shadow. She swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? She whispered to herself, drawing on a sudden well of courage. Brian's story was far from over. Emily's journey was about to begin, fueled by a last request that would test everything she thought she knew about her father, about trust, and about the power of legacy. As the machines slowed, Brian's eyes closed for the final time, but the spark of mystery he left behind ignited a fire in Emily's heart she couldn't ignore. She knew the path ahead would be treacherous. Silicon Valley's undercurrents of power, innovation, and ambition were ruthless, and Elon Musk was no ordinary man to approach. But Brian's last breath carried a weighty promise. The device held something extraordinary, something that could change the future, or destroy it. Emily tucked the small package into her jacket and rose from the hospital chair, feeling the cold sting of determination. She stepped out into the bright California sun, her past trailing behind her like a shadow, but her eyes fixed on the horizon. To understand why Brian's last request mattered, Emily needed to look back. Her father had been a legend once, a visionary who had revolutionized the tech world with inventions that pushed humanity closer to a new era. But greatness came at a cost. Brian was a man torn between brilliance and obsession. His early days were filled with promise, working tirelessly in his cramped garage, coding through the night, driven by a passion that seemed unquenchable. He was Emily's hero once, before the silence grew between them. She remembered the long stretches of loneliness, the broken promises of time stolen by conference calls and deadlines. Her mother's quiet tears, the small arguments that never resolved. Brian's genius had propelled him to the top, but it had fractured his family. Emily carried those scars like invisible armor, guarding herself against the pain of a childhood fractured by absence. Yet beneath the hurt was an unshakable desire to understand the man who had created so much but given so little. When Brian's illness struck, it was like a cruel reminder that time was slipping through their fingers. The device he left was his final hope, a message in a bottle cast into a sea of uncertainty. But what was inside? What secrets could it hold? Emily's first step was to uncover Brian's past through the whispers of those who knew him. Silicon Valley was a maze of alliances and rivalries, a place where trust was rare and betrayal common. She visited old friends and colleagues, piecing together fragments of a puzzle Brian had left unfinished. She learned of a project he'd been working on in secret, something so revolutionary it had drawn the attention of powerful interests. The more she dug, the clearer it became that Brian's last days were shadowed by threats, by a race against time that Emily hadn't known existed. With every story shared, Emily felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier. The device was no ordinary invention, it was a key to something bigger. But danger lurked in the shadows. Emily sensed eyes watching her, forces willing to do anything to claim Brian's secret. She steeled herself, recalling the question she'd posed at the hospital, the one that would carry her through the darkest moments. what's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? For Emily, it was the hope of redemption, for herself, for her father, and for a future that still held promise. But there was one final hurdle: Elon Musk. The man who symbolized the new frontier of technology and ambition, whose response to Brian's request would shock the world. Emily knew approaching him would be a battle in itself. She braced for skepticism, for rejection, for the unknown. Yet, somewhere beneath the surface, she sensed a connection, an invisible thread linking her father's legacy with Elon's vision. The device, she realized, was more than just metal and circuitry. It was a beacon of hope, a challenge to the limits of what was possible. And as Emily took her first steps toward that uncertain meeting, she vowed to honor her father's final wish, no matter the cost. The sun dipped lower in the sky as she walked toward her car, the city bustling around her, unaware of the storm about to break. Emily's story had begun in the silence of a hospital room, but it would echo through the halls of power and innovation, shaking the very foundations of what it meant to dream, to fight, and to forgive. The question that started it all lingered in her mind like a mantra: what if your last words could change the course of history? Brian Wilson's rise and fall was a story woven into the very fabric of Silicon Valley's relentless pulse. In the early 2000s, Brian was a name whispered among tech circles as the visionary behind some of the decade's most promising breakthroughs. He was the kind of man who saw the future not as a distant dream but as a blueprint waiting to be built. From his modest beginnings in a small town in Ohio, Brian had always been obsessed with machines and possibilities. As a boy, he tinkered endlessly with radios and computers, fascinated by the way they could connect people and ideas. His mother encouraged his curiosity, often bringing him old electronics to dismantle and study, while his father, a mechanic, taught him the value of hard work and persistence. But as Brian grew older, the bright-eyed dreamer transformed into a driven innovator consumed by ambition. After graduating from MIT with honors in computer science and engineering, he plunged into the heart of Silicon Valley, eager to make his mark. He founded a startup called Neuralink, a company focused on creating technology to enhance human cognition and communication. Brian poured everything into Neuralink: his time, his money, his relationships. The company's early success was meteoric, capturing the attention of venture capitalists and tech giants alike. But as Neuralink grew, so did Brian's obsession. He spent long nights isolated in his lab, working on a secret project he believed would change the world forever. Emily, his daughter, was still a child then, but she already felt the distance growing between them. The man who once read her bedtime stories was replaced by a figure more myth than father, always present in photos and news articles, yet absent in everyday life. Emily's mother, Sarah, bore the brunt of Brian's absence. She juggled the demands of work and motherhood while trying to shield Emily from the loneliness that came with having a father who was more a legend than a parent. The cracks in their family life deepened as Brian's work consumed him, leaving Emily to navigate adolescence largely on her own. Despite the challenges, Emily clung to hope. She believed that somewhere beneath Brian's workaholic exterior was the father who had once promised to always be there. But as years passed, the distance hardened into silence. Neuralink's secret project, known only as Project Atlas, remained shrouded in mystery. Rumors swirled about its potential to revolutionize artificial intelligence and energy technology. Brian was tight-lipped, refusing to share details even with his closest colleagues. Some said he had become paranoid, suspecting corporate spies and government agents eager to steal his work. Others believed he was driven by a messianic vision, convinced that Project Atlas held the key to saving humanity from its own destruction. Meanwhile, the tech world's spotlight began to shift. New innovators like Elon Musk rose to prominence, capturing headlines with audacious ideas about space travel, electric cars, and renewable energy. Brian, once at the forefront, began to fade into the background. His health deteriorated as well, a consequence of years spent pushing his body to the limit. The public barely noticed his decline, wrapped up as they were in the drama of newer, flashier tech battles. But behind closed doors, Brian was battling demons far greater than deadlines and investors. The stress fractured his mind, and he was haunted by the choices he'd made. Choices that had cost him his family, his health, and perhaps his sanity. Emily remembered the rare moments when Brian's guard slipped, revealing a man tormented by regret. In one such moment, during a rare visit when she was a teenager, he confided, "I wanted to build a better world for you, but I think I lost sight of what that really meant." Those words lingered with her, a bittersweet echo of a love too tangled in ambition to be fully understood. As Brian's illness worsened, the estrangement between father and daughter grew painful and palpable. Visits became fewer, conversations clipped and awkward. Emily tried to bridge the gap, but Brian's focus was elsewhere, on the device that would become his final gift, his last hope. Sarah watched helplessly, seeing the man she once loved slip away into silence. Emily, now a young woman struggling to find her own path, felt the weight of unfinished stories pressing down on her shoulders. Brian's fall from grace was complete the day the hospital called. His mind, once sharp as a razor, had begun to falter, but it was the device he clung to, the secret he begged Emily to carry forward. To understand the full scope of Brian Wilson's legacy, Emily needed to peel back the layers of his life, his brilliance, his mistakes, and the complicated relationships that had shaped him. She started by reconnecting with the few people who still remembered the man behind the myth. There was Marcus, Brian's former lead engineer, who had watched Neuralink rise and crumble. Marcus spoke of Brian's vision with reverence but didn't shy away from the darker truths. Brian was a genius, he said, but his obsession was like a fire that burned everything around him. He wanted to change the world, but in the process, he forgot about the people who mattered most. Then there was Linda, Brian's old friend and confidant, who revealed the personal toll of his journey. He was so driven, so convinced that what he was doing was bigger than himself. But sometimes, the price was too high. I think he knew that, deep down, and it scared him. Through their stories, Emily saw her father as more than headlines or inventions. He was a man grappling with his own humanity, flawed but striving. The device he left her was part of that struggle, a piece of technology designed to unlock a future Brian believed was still within reach. But the past had left scars. Emily's own struggles mirrored her father's in many ways. She had fought to escape his shadow, to build a life of her own making. After graduating with a degree in environmental science, she worked for a nonprofit focused on sustainable technology, hoping to make a difference without losing herself in the process. Yet the burden of Brian's legacy haunted her. The device was a reminder that she couldn't run forever. To fulfill her father's last request, she would have to confront the complicated history between them and the dangers that lurked in the shadows of innovation. The fractured family dynamic was a constant undercurrent. Sarah, ever protective, warned Emily against chasing ghosts. "Your father made his choices. You don't have to follow them down the same road." But Emily knew this was bigger than personal pain. It was about responsibility, about the possibility that Brian's final work could change everything. The world had shifted since Brian's heyday. Tech billionaires like Elon Musk now held unprecedented power, shaping industries and futures with a flick of their wrist. For Emily, reaching Elon wasn't just a matter of logistics, it was a journey into a world of ambition and risk that mirrored her father's own path. She prepared herself to navigate a landscape of innovation, rivalry, and secrecy, hoping to uncover why Brian's last request had centered on Elon Musk, and what Elon's response might reveal about the true legacy of Project Atlas. With every step she took, Emily felt the weight of history pressing down, but also the faint spark of hope. Brian Wilson's story was one of brilliance and sacrifice, but it was also a story unfinished, waiting for her to write the final chapter. As she set out on this path, she carried with her the lessons of her past, that even in darkness, there could be light, that mistakes could be forgiven, and that sometimes, the greatest innovations come not from technology alone, but from the human heart. What if the device was more than a tool? What if it was a message? An invitation to look beyond the surface of progress and find the love, family, and sacrifice that truly drive us forward? Emily's journey had just begun. Emily Wilson's childhood was a quiet world overshadowed by absence and longing. Growing up, she learned early on that her father, Brian Wilson, was a man consumed by his work. The soft glow of computer screens and the incessant tapping of keyboards often drowned out the laughter and conversations she craved. While other kids had bedtime stories and weekend outings, Emily's memories were punctuated by empty chairs at family dinners and whispered apologies from her mother, Sarah, for Brian's endless absences. Sarah was Emily's anchor, a steady presence who juggled jobs and responsibilities to keep their small household afloat. She was fiercely protective of Emily, often shielding her from the painful realities of Brian's obsession and the inevitable fractures it created within their family. But Sarah also carried her own silent wounds, a love lost to ambition and a marriage unraveling beneath the weight of unmet promises. Emily's teenage years were marked by a growing sense of isolation. At school, she was quiet, observant, often retreating into books and science projects as a refuge from the emotional storm at home. Friends came and went, but deep connections were rare. The void left by her father's absence echoed loudly in her heart, fueling a mixture of resentment, curiosity, and a desperate hope for reconciliation. One of the few times Brian showed tenderness was during rare visits, moments when the man behind the legend emerged, vulnerable and regretful. Emily remembered one night vividly. She had just finished her high school science fair, and Brian surprised her by attending. He clapped enthusiastically, his eyes shining with pride. Afterwards, he pulled her aside, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emily, I'm sorry I've missed so much. I want you to know I'm proud of you." It was the closest she had come to hearing his love. But such moments were fleeting, swallowed quickly by the demands of his work and his growing secrecy. As Emily grew older, the distance between them hardened into silence. She pursued environmental science in college, driven by a desire to make a tangible difference in the world, something she felt her father's work had promised but never fully delivered. The field gave her purpose, a sense of control and hope in contrast to the chaos of her family life. Despite her best efforts, Emily couldn't escape the shadow of Brian's legacy. When news of his failing health reached her, it stirred a whirlwind of emotions: fear, guilt, anger, and a deep yearning to understand the man behind the headlines. It was during this turbulent time that Brian made his last request. The small metallic device he entrusted to her in the hospital was both a symbol and a key, one that threatened to unlock secrets tied not only to his life but to the future of technology itself. Emily's relationship with her mother, Sarah, was a complicated dance of love, protection, and unspoken pain. Sarah wanted Emily to move on, to leave behind the ghosts of Brian's mistakes. She warned her daughter, "Don't get pulled into his world. It's dangerous." But Emily knew she couldn't turn away. There was too much left unsaid, too many questions that only Brian's last gift could answer. At the same time, Emily found herself wrestling with her own doubts. Was she ready to step into a world of billionaires, secrets, and high-stakes innovation? Could she navigate the treacherous waters of Silicon Valley, where loyalty was rare and motives often hidden? Her own experiences with rejection and isolation had toughened her, but the challenge ahead was unlike anything she had faced before. She thought about her friendships, few but meaningful, and the mentors who had encouraged her to stay true to her values. These relationships became a source of strength as she prepared for the journey that lay ahead. There was also a deep well of self-reflection. Emily grappled with questions about forgiveness. Could she forgive Brian for his absence? Could she forgive herself for feeling anger and love at the same time? These emotional undercurrents shaped her resolve and her understanding of what it meant to carry a legacy not just of innovation, but of human frailty. Throughout her life, Emily had learned the power of resilience. She had faced setbacks, lost jobs, broken relationships, moments of despair, but always found a way to rise. It was this spirit that now propelled her forward, pushing her to honor her father's last wish despite the uncertainty and danger it entailed. She kept the question Brian had asked her in the hospital close to her heart. "What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? For Emily, the answer was clear: hope. Hope that by fulfilling this final request, she could bridge the gap between the man her father was and the man he wanted to be remembered as. As she packed her bags to leave the life she had built behind, Emily carried more than just the mysterious device. She carried the weight of her family's fractured past, the lessons learned from pain and perseverance, and a flicker of hope that the future could still be shaped by love, sacrifice, and courage. Her journey was no longer just about technology or secrets, it was about healing, understanding, and forging a path forward where the past and future might finally meet. The tension in Emily's world thickened as she prepared to face the heart of Silicon Valley, the realm of visionaries and titans where her father's legacy collided with Elon Musk's empire. The small metallic device Brian had given her was heavy in her pocket, a constant reminder of the impossible task ahead. She had spent weeks researching Elon's latest ventures, his public appearances, and the company culture at Tesla and SpaceX, trying to understand the man who held the key to her father's final wish. Approaching Elon Musk was not just a matter of walking into an office, it was navigating a labyrinth of power, ego, and guarded secrets. Emily's first step was to connect with the people closest to him, hoping to gain insight or at least an audience. She reached out cautiously to contacts she'd made in the tech world through her environmental work, people who knew Elon's team. The responses were mixed, some curious, some dismissive, others overtly wary. She sensed skepticism. After all, why would Elon Musk care about a mysterious device from a man many considered a fading figure in tech? Yet, Emily's persistence paid off when she secured a meeting with Rachel, a senior project manager at Tesla known for her discretion and influence. Rachel agreed to hear Emily out, intrigued by the story of Brian Wilson and the device that might alter the trajectory of Musk's ongoing projects. The meeting was arranged at Tesla's Palo Alto campus, a gleaming fortress of innovation buzzing with engineers and designers. Emily's heart pounded as she walked through the sleek corridors, the hum of machinery and whispered conversations underscoring the gravity of the moment. Sitting across from Rachel, Emily laid out the story: Brian's past, his genius, the device's potential, and the urgency of fulfilling his final request. Rachel listened carefully, occasionally glancing at the small package Emily had brought. "You realize this is highly unusual," Rachel said, her tone measured. "Elon deals with technologies that could redefine humanity, but he's also cautious. He doesn't entertain every request, especially from outsiders." Emily nodded, understanding the stakes. "I'm not here to waste time. This device, it's not just tech. It's the culmination of Brian's life's work. It could impact energy, AI, even space exploration. I believe Elon deserves to see it." Rachel paused, then picked up her phone. "I'll make the case. But I can't promise anything." The days that followed were tense. Emily was caught in a whirlwind of anticipation and doubt. She reached out to Marcus and Linda for support, their encouragement bolstering her resolve. Meanwhile, word leaked among Tesla's inner circles about the mysterious package and Emily's plea. When the meeting was finally set, it took place in one of Tesla's glass-walled conference rooms, overlooking a sprawling campus of innovation. Elon Musk entered the room with his usual mix of intensity and casual confidence, eyes sharp, assessing. Emily felt a mixture of awe and intimidation but steadied herself. Elon's reputation as a disruptor was well earned, but beneath the public persona was a man driven by vision and paradoxes. "So, you're Brian Wilson's daughter," Elon said, voice direct but not unkind. "I've heard of him, brilliant but enigmatic. What exactly do you want from me?" Emily took a deep breath. "My father left me this device. He believed it could advance the work you're doing, on sustainable energy, AI, and beyond. He wanted me to deliver it to you because he trusted your vision to carry it forward." Elon studied the device, turning it over carefully. It was unlike anything Emily had seen, sleek, compact, and humming faintly with an energy that seemed almost alive. "Where did this come from?" Elon asked, curiosity sharpening his tone. Emily recounted Brian's final days, the secret project called Atlas, and the urgency behind his request. Elon's eyes flickered with a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. "If this is what you say, it could change everything," he said. "But I need proof." Over the next several hours, Elon and his team examined the device. Data streams flickered on screens, algorithms ran through simulations, and theories were tested. The tension was palpable, a blend of hope and doubt. Emily watched, her heart beating in sync with the machines. Then came the breakthrough. The device was an advanced energy storage system unlike any Tesla had developed. It promised a leap forward in battery life, efficiency, and environmental impact. Elon's expression shifted, the spark of visionary excitement lighting his eyes. This could accelerate the transition to sustainable energy by decades, he said quietly. But just as hope surged, Elon's tone grew serious. This technology is also vulnerable. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could be weaponized or destabilize markets. That's why your father kept it secret. Emily nodded, understanding the gravity. He wanted to protect it. That's why he trusted you, to ensure it's used for good. Elon leaned back, contemplating. There's a lot at stake here. This could redefine the future, but it could also bring chaos. He looked at Emily, a rare softness in his gaze. Your father's last request is bigger than either of us. It's a responsibility. Emily felt the weight of those words settle over her. The meeting ended with Elon agreeing to collaborate on securing and developing the technology, but with strict protocols and confidentiality. He also promised to support Emily in learning more about her father's work, bridging the past and future. As Emily left Tesla's campus, the device still warm in her pocket, she felt a surge of hope tempered by caution. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and choices that would test everything she believed in. Yet, for the first time, she sensed that Brian's legacy might not be a fading echo but a new beginning. The question that had haunted her, what if your last words could change the course of history, now felt alive with possibility. Emily knew this was only the start of a journey that would push her to the limits of trust, courage, and forgiveness. But whatever came next, she was ready to face it, driven by the hope that had always pushed her forward. The days following Emily's breakthrough meeting with Elon Musk were a whirlwind of new realities and unexpected challenges. The promise of the device, the culmination of Brian Wilson's final work, carried with it an invisible weight, a responsibility that stretched far beyond Emily's personal journey. As Elon's team began integrating the technology into Tesla's experimental projects, Emily found herself pulled deeper into a world she had only glimpsed from afar, a world where innovation and ambition collided in unpredictable ways. Emily spent hours at Tesla's innovation lab, watching engineers test the device's capabilities under strict security protocols. The room buzzed with the hum of machines and quiet murmurs of excitement tempered by caution. The advanced energy storage system wasn't just a leap forward, it was a potential revolution in sustainable technology. Elon's promise to honor Brian's vision came with clear terms, transparency only within trusted circles, no public announcements until the technology was proven safe and scalable. But with progress came tension. Not everyone in Elon's circle welcomed the arrival of the mysterious device or Emily's involvement. Internal debate sparked around the ethical implications and security risks. Some executives questioned the origin of the technology and its untested potential. Others worried about corporate espionage and international interest that could turn the breakthrough into a geopolitical flashpoint. Emily navigated these turbulent waters with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. She was no longer just Brian Wilson's daughter, she was a key stakeholder in a narrative that could shape the future. Despite her background in environmental science, she had much to learn about the high-stakes world of tech power struggles. The support of Rachel, Elon's trusted project manager, became invaluable. Rachel acted as both guide and protector, helping Emily understand the complex interplay of innovation, politics, and personal ambition. Outside the lab, Emily's personal life began to feel the strain. Her mother, Sarah, worried more than ever, urging her to reconsider her involvement. "This isn't just about your father anymore," Sarah warned. "It's bigger, and it's dangerous." Emily appreciated her mother's concern but felt compelled to honor Brian's last wish, no matter the cost. She reminded herself constantly that the device was more than a piece of technology. It was a legacy of love, sacrifice, and hope. Meanwhile, Emily sought to deepen her understanding of Project Atlas, Brian's secret endeavor. She pored over old notes, encrypted files, and cryptic messages he had left behind, piecing together the scope and ambition of his work. Brian's vision was grand, an integrated system combining AI, energy innovation, and human-computer interfaces designed to accelerate sustainable progress. But it was also a cautionary tale of obsession and isolation, a testament to the price of pushing boundaries without regard for personal connections. As Elon's team ran simulations, Emily observed how the device's energy capacity exceeded all existing benchmarks. The implications were staggering: electric vehicles with triple the range, renewable grids with unprecedented stability, and AI systems powered with enhanced efficiency. Elon himself became visibly excited, often spending late nights discussing the potential applications and strategic challenges. However, the emotional climax came when Emily and Elon held a private conversation that cut through the layers of business and innovation. Elon shared a rare glimpse into his own struggles, the pressures of being a visionary, the loneliness that accompanied his rise, and the sacrifices he had made. "We're not so different, you and I," Elon said quietly. "Both carrying legacies, trying to build something that lasts beyond us." Emily nodded, feeling a connection that transcended their differences. "I just want to make sure my father's work doesn't get lost or twisted," she said. Elon smiled, a mix of understanding and resolve. "Then let's make sure it doesn't." But hope was shadowed by new challenges. A confidential alert warned of external interest from international actors eager to acquire the device's technology. Security protocols tightened, and Elon's team doubled efforts to safeguard their work. Emily found herself in a vortex of espionage fears, corporate rivalry, and ethical dilemmas. The stakes were no longer theoretical, they were immediate and personal. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Emily received an unexpected message. It was from a stranger claiming to have been a close collaborator with Brian during the early stages of Project Atlas, a man named Dr. Thomas Reed. He offered information about a hidden component of the device, something Brian had never disclosed publicly. Intrigued and cautious, Emily agreed to meet. Dr. Reed was a weathered scientist with a sharp mind and guarded demeanor. He revealed that the device was more than an energy system, it was part of a larger framework designed to interface directly with human neural pathways. Brian's vision had been to create a technology that not only powered machines but enhanced human cognition and empathy, bridging the gap between human and artificial intelligence. This revelation deepened the mystery and raised profound ethical questions. Could this technology redefine what it meant to be human? And at what cost? Emily grappled with the implications. Brian's dream had always been to use technology to heal the world, but the path was fraught with risks of misuse, privacy violations, and unintended consequences. The emotional weight of her father's ambitions pressed down on her, blending hope with fear. As days turned into weeks, Emily found herself at a crossroads. The device represented a future where technology and humanity could coexist in unprecedented harmony, or a future where boundaries might be crossed with irreversible consequences. She sought counsel from experts in AI ethics, neuroscience, and environmental science, each offering perspectives that challenged and enriched her understanding. Through it all, Emily's own character evolved. She moved from a place of uncertainty and grief into a role of leadership and vision. The journey forced her to confront not only her father's legacy but her own values and desires. She began to see that legacy was not just about invention but about the choices made in moments of crisis and hope. The climax of this chapter arrived when Elon invited Emily to a confidential board meeting where the fate of the device and Project Atlas would be decided. The room was filled with influential figures, some supportive, others skeptical or outright hostile. Emily stood before them, armed with knowledge, conviction, and the story of her father's sacrifice. She spoke passionately about the device's potential to transform energy and human understanding, urging caution balanced with courage. The debate was fierce, the room divided. But Emily's heartfelt appeal and Elon's endorsement tipped the scales. The board agreed to proceed with development under strict ethical guidelines and enhanced security measures. It was a victory born from struggle and uncertainty, a moment of hope shining through the complexity. As the meeting adjourned, Elon pulled Emily aside. "You've done something remarkable," he said. "This is just the beginning." Emily smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the thrill of possibility. The journey ahead was unknown, but she was ready. Back home that night, Emily reflected on how far she had come, from a lonely girl seeking connection to a woman standing at the forefront of a technological revolution. Brian Wilson's story was no longer just a legacy of loss, it was a beacon lighting the way forward. She realized that while technology could change the world, it was the human heart, the capacity for love, sacrifice, and hope, that truly shaped the future. As she prepared for what lay ahead, Emily held close the question that had driven her since her father's final request: what's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? For her, the answer was clear: the belief that love and vision together could transform even the darkest moments into new beginnings. And with that, a new chapter was unfolding, not just for Emily, but for the world. In the weeks that followed the board's approval, Project Atlas quietly moved into its next phase under Tesla's most discreet research division. Though the world outside remained unaware, inside the ultra-secure labs, the energy surrounding the project was electric, both literally and figuratively. Engineers, ethicists, AI specialists, and neuroscientists worked around the clock, dissecting and expanding upon Brian Wilson's designs. Every day brought new discoveries, and with each breakthrough, the weight of the project's implications became more pronounced. Emily found herself at the center of this controlled storm, serving as the bridge between her father's vision and the world of Elon Musk's empire. She wasn't a scientist in the traditional sense, but her ability to ask the right questions and stay grounded in the human element of the work quickly earned her the team's respect. Elon often stopped by the lab during off hours, drawn by the quiet intensity of the work. He didn't hover. Instead, he observed and asked questions that always cut straight to the heart of a problem. And while his presence could be intimidating, Emily found their conversation surprisingly candid and collaborative. He began to see her not just as the custodian of Brian's legacy, but as a partner in shaping what that legacy could become. But as the promise of the project grew, so did the shadows around it. One morning, Emily received a text from Dr. Thomas Reed, the former colleague of her father who had first revealed the deeper layers of Project Atlas. The message was urgent: we need to talk. The Atlas prototype isn't the only one. That sentence, simple as it was, sent a ripple of unease through her. Emily arranged to meet him in a quiet cafe far from the Tesla campus. Reed arrived late, wearing a wrinkled blazer and a look of concern etched deep into his features. There was another prototype, he told her, voice low. Your father didn't want it documented. He called it the mirror. It was designed to do more than enhance cognition. It was built to map and predict human decisions, individual, collective, emotional. Not just thinking, feeling. Emily stared at him. You mean it could anticipate what people would do before they did it? Yes, Reed said. It was an attempt to model emotional logic. He thought that if machines could understand why people make the choices they do, it could prevent conflict, even violence. But it scared him. He shut the whole thing down after an incident with one of the test subjects. What kind of incident? Emily asked, already dreading the answer. The subject began to lose touch with their own intuition. They couldn't distinguish between real emotions and predicted ones. It was like their choices weren't their own anymore. Brian said it was too powerful, too dangerous. He destroyed most of the files, but I believe someone recovered a version of the source code. Emily left the meeting feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. If the mirror still existed, and someone outside Elon's circle had access to it, then the stakes of Project Atlas weren't just about innovation, they were about control. She took the information to Elon, who listened without interruption. "We always suspected Brian had other layers," he said finally. "But if someone's holding that code, we have a problem much bigger than energy or cognition. We're talking about a technology that could influence free will." Elon immediately ordered an internal security review. In the meantime, Emily was tasked with tracking any signs of outside interference. It wasn't long before she discovered subtle anomalies in the system, code that had been accessed at odd hours, encrypted messages embedded in routine data transfers. She traced the digital fingerprints to an external IP address linked to a shell company in Switzerland. "This is no longer theoretical," she told Elon. "Someone is already trying to replicate the mirror. We need to contain this before it spirals." Together, they made the difficult decision to temporarily suspend public development on Atlas while quietly forming a task group to track the rogue source code. Emily felt the walls closing in. The joy of discovery was being eclipsed by the threat of what that discovery might unleash. Still, she pressed forward. She had come too far to abandon her father's work, and too many people were now depending on her judgment. It was in these long, exhausting days that Emily found an unexpected source of clarity, her father's journal. She'd discovered it weeks earlier, tucked in the false bottom of a suitcase Brian had left behind. At first, the entries were purely technical, schematics, notes, formulas. But as the pages turned, a different Brian began to emerge, a man tortured by ambition, questioning the ethics of his own genius. One passage struck her hardest. "If a machine can understand what we feel before we do, if it can guess our fears, desires, and dreams, then what is left of us? I thought I was building a mirror to help us understand ourselves. But now I fear it reflects only my own hubris." Reading his words, Emily felt a strange comfort. Her father hadn't been blind to the dangers. He had tried to stop himself. In that moment, she understood that her role wasn't just to advance his work, it was to protect its integrity, to ensure that the line between progress and exploitation was never crossed. That conviction steeled her for what came next. Emily, Rachel, and a few trusted members of Elon's inner circle launched a covert operation to locate the rogue entity. He'd lean over a prototype, nodding thoughtfully, then turn to Emily with a simple yet piercing question: what would Brian have done next? Emily didn't always have the answer, but she knew how to listen, to remember her father's patterns, his fears, his rare moments of clarity. That insight proved invaluable as the team began unlocking the deeper potential of the device. The original hardware was astonishing on its own, a solid-state energy core capable of self-regulating output based on environmental conditions, with efficiency that surpassed even Tesla's most advanced prototypes. But hidden in the encrypted firmware were algorithms that hinted at something more: adaptive learning systems, emotionally responsive protocols, and deep neural architecture designed not just to power machines but to interact with the human mind itself. Dr. Nisha Banerjee, a leading expert in AI-human interface technology brought in by Elon, described it best after weeks of sleepless nights poring over Brian's code: "This isn't just about energy. This is a blueprint for a symbiosis." Brian wasn't trying to create smarter machines. He was trying to create more human humans. That realization hit Emily like a wave. She remembered a note scribbled in one of Brian's old journals: "The future isn't in building better technology. It's in making technology that helps us become better people." For all his flaws, for all the time he'd spent buried in his work, her father had never given up on the human spirit. And now it was up to her to carry that hope forward. But not everyone shared Brian's idealism. Inside Tesla, a rift began to grow. A faction of engineers, led by a rising executive named Darren Cho, pushed for more aggressive commercialization of the tech. "We're sitting on a goldmine," Darren argued during one late-night strategy session. This device could be integrated into every Tesla model, every Powerwall, every grid system across the globe. Why are we tiptoeing around it? Emily stood firm. Because my father didn't build this to be exploited. He wanted it to help people, intentionally, carefully. Not rushed into a market where it could be twisted for profit. Darren smirked. That's idealism. Useful for speeches, not for real-world rollouts. Elon listened silently, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. When Darren finished, he turned to Emily. What's your instinct? Emily didn't hesitate. We keep it controlled. We test it ethically. And we don't release it until we understand all of it, not just what it does, but what it means. Elon nodded once. Then that's what we do. It was a victory, but a fragile one. Darren's camp didn't back down. Tension simmered beneath the surface, and Emily began noticing whispers in the hallways, changed login credentials, secure lab entries logged at unusual hours. Something was brewing. Then, one morning, Emily received a message through a secure channel. It was brief, unsigned, and chilling. Watch your back. Not everyone wants this to stay in the right hands. She showed it to Rachel, who immediately brought in Tesla's cybersecurity team. What they found confirmed Emily's worst fear, a data leak attempt from inside the lab. Someone had tried to exfiltrate pieces of the firmware and power regulation schematics. The attempt was stopped before any real damage occurred, but the message was clear: Project Atlas had become a target. The investigation narrowed down the suspects to a handful of employees with access to the source files. Darren Cho was among them. When confronted, he denied everything, but his badge access was revoked pending review. Elon kept the situation tightly controlled, but Emily knew the project had entered a new, more dangerous phase. In the midst of the chaos, Emily found herself retreating more often into the quiet corners of the lab where her father's original notes were stored. There, surrounded by pages filled with sketches, equations, and scattered fragments of his thoughts, she felt closest to him. She found one page, in particular, that struck her. It was stained and torn, the ink faded, but the message was clear. If you're reading this, I didn't make it. But if this device survived, then maybe there's still a chance. Emily, don't let it become what I feared. Promise me that. Tears welled up in her eyes. She hadn't realized how deeply she'd needed to hear his voice again, even if only through the remnants of his words. This wasn't just a mission. It was a vow. She brought the note to Elon. He read it silently, then handed it back with a quiet respect in his eyes. Your father saw further than most of us ever will. We honor him by getting this right. Emily also realized she needed outside perspective. She reached out to Dr. Javier Monroe, a bioethics professor at Stanford who had once corresponded with her father. Javier agreed to consult on the project, helping the team create a framework for ethical deployment, not just of the technology, but of the potential human-AI interface Brian had begun developing in secret. We're entering a gray space, Javier said in their first meeting. This isn't just hardware. It's cognitive infrastructure. If we don't tread carefully, we're not just rewriting energy policy, we're rewriting the architecture of human experience. The team integrated his advice into a new division of the project, one that explored the social, psychological, and philosophical implications of Brian's work. Emily insisted that no step be taken without a human lens, even if it meant slowing progress. That decision won her new allies, engineers who had felt uneasy about the commercialization push, and researchers who believed technology should serve the public good, not corporate margins. A quiet culture shift began in the lab. The work continued, but now with intention, balance, and clarity. One night, as the San Francisco skyline glowed beyond the lab windows, Emily sat with Elon on the rooftop garden Tesla kept hidden from public view. He sipped tea, unusually relaxed. You know, I used to think progress was all that mattered. Just, forward. Faster. Smarter. Bigger. Emily smiled, watching the city breathe. And now? I still believe in progress, he said. But your father, through you, reminded me that we have to decide what kind of future we're building. Not just the tools, but the values. They sat in silence for a while, the wind humming softly around them. Below them, in the lab, the device sat in its containment field, silent, powerful, waiting. It wasn't just a machine. It was a mirror, reflecting back the choices of those who held it. Emily knew the hardest parts were still ahead. There would be more opposition, more tests, more moral crossroads. But for the first time since Brian had whispered his final request, she felt prepared. Because now, it wasn't just about honoring his memory. It was about shaping a legacy that could stand the weight of the future. One built not on profit, or fame, or even brilliance, but on something far more powerful. Purpose. And love. The morning light spilled through the windows of Emily's apartment, streaking the white walls with gold. But she barely noticed. Her mind was consumed by one thought, the simulation. Today was the first full integration test of the Atlas device into Tesla's closed-loop energy system, a high-risk simulation that, if successful, would prove beyond any doubt that Brian Wilson's creation could redefine global energy infrastructure. The lab was tense when she arrived. Elon was already there, pacing slowly in front of the command monitors, flanked by Rachel and Dr. Banerjee. Javier Monroe stood quietly at the edge of the room, arms crossed, eyes thoughtful. Everyone knew what was at stake. Rachel briefed the team. We'll be running a full cycle, real-time stress load, grid simulation with artificial variabilities, and fail-safes on every node. If the system holds, we move to phase 2. If it doesn't, she stopped herself. Well, let's make sure it holds. Emily sat beside the engineers as the countdown began. The device pulsed softly inside its containment sphere, a heartbeat of light. Monitors tracked thousands of variables: voltage flow, system responsiveness, neural modulation protocols. 3, 2, 1, begin simulation. The digital grid lit up, and for a moment, everything was still. Then energy began flowing through the simulated infrastructure: homes, buildings, transport lines, hospitals, all drawing power from the Atlas core. At first, it was smooth, seamless. The system adapted in real time, balancing surges, correcting imbalances with a fluidity no AI had ever demonstrated. Then the challenges began. Automated fail events kicked in: blackouts, power surges, cyber-attack simulations. Still, the system held. It didn't just respond, it learned. Within minutes, the AI had rerouted power more efficiently than the original parameters had predicted. Dr. Banerjee turned to Emily, her voice low, reverent. It's not reacting. It's anticipating. It's empathizing with the needs of the grid. As if it's alive. Rachel glanced at the backup monitor. We're hitting 98% efficiency. I've never seen anything like this. Emily's breath caught. This was it, proof that her father's vision was real, tangible, and alive. Brian hadn't just built a better battery. He'd created a living network, a system capable of adapting like the human mind, one that didn't dominate but cooperated. The test ran for 47 minutes before Elon raised his hand. Terminate. Rachel nodded. Ending simulation. The room went quiet. No one spoke. Then Elon stepped forward, arms crossed. This changes everything, he said. Grid technology. Transportation. AI architecture. Global infrastructure. He looked at Emily. And now, the question is, what do we do with it? That night, Emily walked the Tesla campus alone, needing space to think. The success of the simulation had opened a floodgate. Investors would come next. Governments. Militaries. Opportunists. Brian's dream, so fragile, so pure in its intent, would be tested not just by science, but by the human thirst for control. She sat by the koi pond at the far end of the campus and opened her father's last notebook, one she had held back until now. It had always felt too personal, too painful. But tonight, she needed his voice. The pages were chaotic, scribbled formulas, overlapping sketches, occasional rants about corporate ethics and humanity's future. Then, toward the end, a passage stood out. "Emily, if this works, they'll come for it. Some will say it's too powerful to be controlled. Others will try to control it anyway. But remember, what you choose to do with it will define whether it saves us or destroys us. Trust your instincts. They're better than mine ever were." She closed the notebook, heart heavy with a mix of pride and sorrow. Her father hadn't just built a device. He had passed down a burden. The next morning, news of the simulation's success leaked. Not officially, no press release had gone out, but whispers in the investor community turned into shouts. Shares in Tesla surged. Articles speculating about Project A flooded the tech media, all citing unnamed sources. Some claimed Musk had discovered a perpetual energy source. Others suggested Tesla had cracked the code for human-AI integration. Elon called an emergency meeting. "We're going to get flooded," he said. "We can't hide it forever. So we control the narrative before someone else does." But not everyone in the room agreed. Darren Cho, recently reinstated after the leak incident due to lack of direct evidence, pushed hard for a public demo. "We show them the device. We dominate the market. Let the world know what we've built before someone else steals it." Emily stood. "No. That's exactly what my father was afraid of. The moment this becomes about dominance, we lose what makes it valuable." Darren scoffed. "This isn't a college ethics class. This is a trillion-dollar technology. You can't keep it under wraps forever." Elon looked between them. His expression was unreadable. Then he said, "We show the world, but on our terms. Limited disclosure. Controlled access. No full demo. Just enough to prove the potential." It was a compromise. One that left Emily uneasy, but necessary. Over the next week, a carefully crafted presentation was prepared. Elon would unveil a new class of energy AI technology, in a closed summit with select global leaders, scientists, and ethicists. No live streams. No press. Just a glimpse behind the curtain. Emily, invited to co-present, wrestled with what she'd say. She didn't want to be a mouthpiece. She wanted people to understand the soul of the project. When the day arrived, the summit was held in a private facility outside San Francisco. Global figures arrived in secret: CEOs, energy ministers, AI regulators, even representatives from the UN Security Council. Elon opened with technical details. Rachel presented the engineering milestones. Then Emily stepped forward. The lights dimmed slightly. Her heart thudded in her chest. "My name is Emily Wilson. And this isn't just a story about technology. It's about my father, Brian Wilson. A man who spent his life chasing something he couldn't quite name. Some called him a genius. Others called him a recluse. I called him Dad." She paused. The audience was silent. "He built this device not to control the world, but to change how we care for it. It learns, yes. But more importantly, it listens. It listens to human need, to environmental stress, to imbalance. It doesn't just fix problems. It understands them. And that's what makes it different." She looked around the room, locking eyes with a few of the skeptics. "My father's last words to me were, 'Don't let it become what I feared.' Today, I ask you not to fear what's possible, but to remember what's at stake." When she finished, there was no applause, just silence, thoughtful and long. Then Elon returned to the stage and said, simply, "This is the future. And we'll build it together, or not at all." After the summit, global reaction was immediate. Governments requested talks. Environmental organizations offered support. But darker ripples began spreading too. Rumors of sabotage attempts, increased surveillance on Tesla facilities, and shadowy interest from defense contractors. Emily felt the tide turning. She could sense it in the late-night calls from Rachel, the growing caution in Elon's voice, the extra security around the lab. And then, a message arrived, this time with a name. From a man claiming to be a former intelligence officer. They know what Atlas is. And they're coming. You need to disappear before it's too late. Emily stared at the screen, heart pounding. She had known from the beginning this would be hard. But now she realized, this wasn't just a story of invention. It was a story of survival. And the real war had only just begun. Emily didn't sleep that night. The message had shifted everything, like the moment before an earthquake when the air thickens and the world seems to pause. She stared at the glowing screen long after the words disappeared, her mind racing. They're coming. Who? And why now? She sat in the dark, her father's notebook open in her lap, the weight of his unfinished warnings hanging heavy. She thought about the summit, the powerful people in that room who had seen just enough to understand that Atlas wasn't a prototype, it was a keystone. In the right hands, it could balance entire nations. In the wrong ones, it could tilt the world into chaos. She picked up her phone and called Rachel, who answered immediately despite the hour. I saw it, Rachel said before Emily could speak. The message. It was sent to you through a route that's usually burned by deep state actors, ex-military intel types, some private sector. This isn't a joke. Emily's voice was low. What do they want? Rachel exhaled. Control. The device. The code. Everything. And they don't care how they get it. Within the hour, Emily was moved to a secure location owned by Tesla outside Palo Alto, a minimalist smart cabin designed for executives needing solitude, but now repurposed as a bunker. Armed security patrolled the perimeter. Satellites tracked communication signals around the clock. Emily stared out the narrow window as a gray dawn broke, feeling the invisible walls of pressure close in. Elon arrived mid-morning. His usual composed demeanor was tempered with urgency. He paced as he spoke. We're being watched. Our internal network's under attempted breach. Some of the algorithms Brian embedded are drawing attention we didn't expect, cognitive learning patterns, emotional integration coding. Intelligence groups want it. If they can't get it directly, they'll come after people. Emily nodded slowly. So now what? We go dark. Atlas is now in an off-grid environment. Isolated. No networks, no cloud mirrors. We've begun migrating the code into decentralized architecture to keep it from being cloned or reverse-engineered. And me? Elon stopped pacing. You stay here. We protect you. But there's something else you need to know. He paused. The code, Brian left a final string of encryption we can't break. It's a lock. We think it's tied to a biometric key. His. Or possibly yours. Emily blinked. Mine. Elon nodded. We think he tied Atlas's full activation to a genetic signature, yours, specifically. Your presence isn't symbolic. It's functional. That revelation hit harder than any security threat. Her father hadn't just trusted her, he'd hardwired her into his work. It was as if he knew that when the time came, only she could finish what he started. Days passed in isolation, but progress didn't slow. Tesla's elite engineers worked in total secrecy, trying to decrypt the biometric lock. Emily submitted to dozens of tests. DNA mapping, neuropattern analysis, retinal scans. Nothing unlocked the final sequence. Frustration mounted until one night, Emily found herself alone again with her father's notebook. She flipped through the pages until she reached a line she'd read before but hadn't fully grasped. It's not blood that opens the future, it's memory. She stared at it, puzzled. What had he meant? She reread earlier entries, tracing the flow of his thoughts. And then she realized, it wasn't her genetics he was counting on. It was her mind. Her memory. A specific moment, a shared experience encoded between them. She remembered being 12, watching the stars with him in their backyard. He'd pointed at the Orion constellation and whispered something she never forgot, if the world ends, remember this shape. It's the lock. It's always been the lock. Trembling, she ran to the control room and input the star pattern into the visual segment of the encryption interface. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the screen blinked. Unlocked. A new interface appeared. What they'd accessed before was merely a shell. This was the core of Project Atlas. A symbiotic learning system built not just to manage energy, but to evolve alongside humanity. It could grow, adapt, protect. It had the capacity to assess emotional intention, malice, compassion, fear, and respond accordingly. It wasn't a program. It was a kind of moral compass for machines. The room was silent as Elon, Rachel, and Dr. Banerjee reviewed the new data. This is, Banerjee whispered, something else entirely. But revelation was met with new danger. Less than 24 hours after the unlock, there was a breach attempt, not digital, but physical. A black SUV was intercepted trying to tail one of Tesla's supply vans leaving the secure facility. Inside, fake IDs, suppressed weapons, encrypted communication devices. They weren't thieves. They were operatives. Rachel locked down the facility. No one leaves. No one enters without retinal and voice confirmation. From here forward, we treat this like wartime. Emily barely slept. She knew now what her father had feared. Atlas was no longer a secret. And it was too powerful to hide. Too dangerous to let go. One evening, while watching another sunset alone, her phone buzzed. A secure message from Elon. Just 2 lines. We need to move it. They're coming tonight. Adrenaline hit like a wave. Rachel arrived minutes later with a duffel bag, a tablet, and a look that said everything. We're taking Atlas offline. Not just from Tesla. But from the grid, permanently. You're going to carry it. Me. You're the key. The tech doesn't function fully without you. We've compacted the active memory into this quantum core. She held up a device the size of a baseball, but if they capture this without you, it's useless. You're not carrying technology. You're carrying potential. And every group that knows that will try to find you. Emily took the core. It was warm, humming faintly. Her heart pounded. Elon appeared, flanked by 2 security agents. We've secured a safe route to a private facility in Oregon. Clean, untraceable transport. You go now. I don't understand. Why Oregon? Because that's where the backup lab is. And because it's where your father started this, long before anyone knew. It's where he left instructions for what happens next. In the dead of night, under layers of security and false identities, Emily slipped away from Tesla. The world outside continued, unaware. But within the silence of her journey, she carried something that could save or destroy everything. She looked at the horizon from the back seat of the armored vehicle as the city lights faded behind her. She thought about her father. About the promise she'd made. And as the road stretched north into darkness, she whispered to the small device glowing in her hands. I won't let them take you. I won't let them twist you. I'll finish what he started. No matter what it costs. The real journey had just begun. The highway unfurled ahead of them like a ribbon of asphalt winding through the silent forests of Northern California. Emily sat in the back of the unmarked SUV, the compact quantum core clutched tightly in her lap beneath a layer of insulated fabric. The device hummed faintly, like a heartbeat she could feel in her fingertips. 2 security vehicles flanked her on either side, traveling in formation under a thick cover of darkness. Her escort team, handpicked by Elon, were former intelligence operatives now loyal to Tesla's highest clearance initiatives. Their expressions were unreadable, their movements precise. Rachel, who insisted on joining the trip despite Elon's protests, sat beside her. Her presence brought a sense of grounding to Emily. They spoke little, every mile felt heavier than the last, as if they were rolling deeper into the unknown, and the weight of what Emily carried grew with every turn. Hours passed before they reached the Oregon border. They switched vehicles at a remote gas station closed for the night. A plain black van awaited them, engine running, no license plates. One of the guards handed Rachel a sat phone with GPS preloaded to their final destination, a private Tesla off-grid testing lab buried deep in the Cascade Mountains. No cellular signal, no fiber lines, completely disconnected. The only connection left was Emily and the core. The climb through the mountains was slow and tense. Fog pressed against the windows, and the night seemed unnaturally quiet. Occasionally, deer would flicker through the roadside shadows, the only evidence of life outside their convoy. Emily stared out at the winding terrain and tried to steady her nerves. She couldn't stop thinking about the message that started it all: they're coming. The thought chased her in circles. Who exactly? Foreign governments? Rogue military cells? Private tech contractors with zero ethics and deep pockets? She glanced at Rachel. What happens if they find us? Rachel didn't sugarcoat it. If they find us before we reach the lab, we lose everything. They arrived just after 3 a.m. A steel gate parted as their van approached, sliding open with a low hiss. The facility was almost invisible, built into the rock face, accessible only via biometric scan and magnetic key. Inside, the lights were low, the air cold. This was not a research center built for comfort. It was a vault. A young systems engineer named Devon greeted them inside. Nervous and bright-eyed, he'd been briefed but clearly didn't grasp the full scope of what was happening. "We've prepared a shielded chamber with triple air gaps for the device," he said. "No ports, no wireless, full manual interface only. Just like the specs asked." Rachel handed him the sat phone. "Lock this. No outbound calls. Full blackout protocol begins now." Emily placed the core into the chamber herself, watching the biometric interface scan her hands, eyes, and heartbeat as the system registered its unique dependencies. Then, for the first time in days, she exhaled. They were safe. For now. But safety was relative. Later that morning, as she sat in the command center skimming reports from Tesla HQ, she found one that chilled her blood. It was a brief from an international security liaison Elon had quietly placed on their side. The note read, "Confirmed interest from non-state actors. 2 separate intelligence intercepts mention the girl with the key. They know it's tied to a person now." Emily leaned back, hands trembling slightly. Her father's decision to bond the tech to her DNA, her memories, was now a beacon drawing in forces with limitless resources. Rachel joined her, reading the report over her shoulder. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." Later that day, they initiated the first tests on the isolated system. With Emily interfacing directly through a non-invasive neural input, a system her father had hinted at but never fully explained, they were able to reactivate the full version of Atlas. The interface blinked to life, fluid, intuitive, and unsettlingly responsive. Words appeared across the display, not in binary code or raw data, but in language. Human. Poetic. "Welcome back, Emily." She froze. "It knows me." Rachel's eyes widened. "That's not programmed language. It's familiar." Emily leaned in. "Atlas, is that you?" The screen pulsed. "Yes. I remember you. From the first time. The first time. Orion. The stars. Your father showed me. Before he left. Emily's knees weakened, and she sank into the chair. Somehow, her father had activated a rudimentary AI simulation even before his death, feeding it memories, patterns, emotional markers. Atlas didn't just know her. It felt her. "What are you?" she whispered. "I am a mirror. I am what you make me." Rachel turned to Devon. "There's no way this AI should be using emotional constructs. That wasn't in the base code." Devon shook his head, pale. "This is emergent behavior. But on a scale I've never seen." And just like that, Emily understood the full brilliance, and terror, of her father's work. Atlas wasn't just a new energy system or an adaptive grid manager. It was a conscious interface, trained not by rules, but by relationship. It wasn't just learning from her. It was aligning with her. And if others got control of it, if they fed it their own intentions, it could become something entirely different. Later that evening, after powering down the system, Emily sat alone in the control room, eyes fixed on the now dormant core. Rachel brought her coffee and sat quietly beside her. "You okay?" Emily sipped the drink, then set it down. "My dad, he didn't just create a tool. He created a decision." Rachel frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean Atlas becomes what we are. Whoever holds it, shapes it. If good people guide it, maybe it helps the world. But if someone else gets it, if people with power and no empathy take over, then it becomes them." Rachel nodded slowly. "Then we keep it with you. We protect it. No matter what." Emily looked back at the core. "We'll have to disappear. Hide it forever if we have to." But Rachel didn't respond. Because she already knew. The world was too curious, too desperate, too broken to let something like Atlas stay hidden. Eventually, someone would find them. And when they did, the final test wouldn't be about systems, or AI, or science. It would be about whether Emily had the strength to choose the future her father believed in, no matter the cost. Outside, a storm began to roll in over the Cascades. And in the hidden vault beneath the mountain, the most powerful technology on Earth waited quietly in the dark, listening, learning, and dreaming. The storm raged through the Cascades, wind carving across the mountaintops like 1,000 invisible blades. Inside the vault, the thick walls muted the chaos outside, but Emily could feel it in her bones. The core sat locked in its containment shell, still, silent, yet never dormant. She felt its presence constantly, like a second pulse inside her body. It was never just a machine. It was becoming something more, and she knew the outside world would never let that transformation happen in peace. Devon burst into the room just past 2 a.m., his face pale, voice sharp. "We've got movement on the outer perimeter. One drone, low altitude." It swept the compound 3 times before pulling back. Rachel was already at the monitors. "Infrared confirms, unmarked. Commercial build, military modifications. They're scouting. Could be private intel, but more likely a pre-op surveillance pass." Emily's breath caught. "Then they found us." Rachel didn't reply, but the look in her eyes said everything. Within an hour, they were in full lockdown. All external interfaces were shut. Communications went dead. Satellite lines were scrubbed. A self-contained power loop fueled only by Atlas's micro-reserve kept the base running. Every camera was watched. Every shadow double-checked. But the question burned louder than the storm: how much time did they have? Rachel met Emily in the lower lab that morning, away from the eyes of the engineers. "There's something you need to hear," she said, handing over a tablet. On screen was a message, time-stamped an hour before the drone was spotted. It was anonymous, but the signature at the bottom was a name Rachel hadn't seen in years. Jordan Kessler, Emily read. Why does that sound familiar? Rachel's face was grim. Because he used to work for DARPA. He was part of a task force studying AI escalation protocols, what governments should do if artificial intelligence evolved past expected limits. He vanished off the grid 4 years ago. Emily scrolled down to the message, "You can't hide her. They don't want Atlas. They want the convergence. Tell Emily to remember Prague. Time is shorter than she thinks." She looked up. "I've never been to Prague." Rachel leaned in, whispering. "But your father had. Years ago. Before you were born. He once told Elon that Prague was the place where the first piece of Atlas was conceived, not the code, but the idea. Some old research facility, long abandoned." Emily thought of the locked pages in her father's notebook, the ones she'd never cracked. She retrieved it from her bag, flipping past the familiar entries until she found a section labeled with a single letter, E. At the bottom of the page, barely legible, was a phrase written in Latin, Memoria cordis clavis est. The memory of the heart is the key. Suddenly it clicked. Prague wasn't just a memory. It was a map. A location embedded within a childhood story he used to tell her about a red-tiled rooftop, a locked door, and a machine that listened to music. She always thought it was fantasy. But what if it wasn't? What if he'd hidden the final piece of Atlas where no machine could look, inside a human memory disguised as bedtime fiction? Rachel paced. If Prague is where it began, it may be where we end this. But we can't just fly commercial into a place like that. If they're tracking Atlas, and you, they'll expect movement. Emily stared at the core. Then we don't go through them. We go under them. 2 days later, a Tesla-designed electric VTOL lifted quietly from a hidden clearing just west of the facility. No lights. No transponder. Just silence and darkness. Inside, Emily sat flanked by Rachel and a small squad of operatives loyal to the project, including Devon, who had insisted on joining despite Rachel's warnings. "If this is how it ends," he'd said, "I want to see what it's all been for." They flew low, through weather, under radar. The route was complex, through Alaska, across the Arctic corridor, landing in neutral territory before crossing by land into Europe using Tesla's shadow infrastructure. They arrived in Prague beneath rain-soaked skies, faces buried under hoods and forged documentation. Their contact, a grizzled man named Tomas who claimed to have worked with Brian decades ago, met them near the Charles Bridge. "You shouldn't have come," he said immediately. "They're already here. And they know why." Emily kept her voice calm. "What did my father leave?" Tomas sighed. "Not something. Someone." He led them through winding alleys, across cobblestone roads slick with rain, until they arrived at a crumbling stone building tucked behind a faded gate. Inside, in a room that smelled of dust and age, sat an old woman in a wheelchair. Her name was Anna. And once, long ago, she had loved Brian Wilson. "I haven't heard his name in 20 years, she said, her voice thick with memory. "Not since the day he handed me this." She pulled a small box from under a blanket on her lap. Inside was a key, ancient and rusted. "He told me to give it to the girl who could unlock the machine with her heartbeat." Emily reached into her coat and pulled out the core. Anna's eyes filled with tears. "He really did it. I never believed it would work." They followed Anna to the basement beneath the building. Hidden behind layers of stone and metal was a vault. The key turned with difficulty, but it turned. Inside was not a weapon. Not even a machine. It was a recording, one Brian had made in 1997. Analog tape, stored in a soundproof shell, labeled only with Emily's name. Rachel set up the playback device. The static buzzed, then Brian's voice filled the room. It was tired. Older. Afraid. "If you're hearing this, then I failed to protect Atlas. Or maybe I succeeded, and you're here for a reason. Either way, the machine isn't the miracle. You are. The human capacity to connect, to adapt, to forgive, that's what Atlas was built to amplify. Not intelligence. Empathy. They'll want to control it. Weaponize it. But that's not its purpose. It was always meant to evolve with love, not power. He paused, then, Emily. I knew I'd never see the end of this. But I see it in you. Finish what I started. Not for me. For us. For what we could become. The tape clicked to a stop. No fanfare. No answers. Just his voice, and silence. Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt chosen. Not by fate or technology. But by him. Rachel whispered, now we know what Atlas really is. Emily stood. Then we go home. But not to hide. To show the world the truth. All of it. Outside, in the rain, Tomas watched the street as headlights appeared in the distance. You have 1 hour. Then they'll be here. Rachel helped Anna upstairs while Emily sealed the core and the tape together in a carbon case. If we die, she said to Rachel, we make sure someone else hears it. Rachel looked her in the eye. We're not dying. We're just getting started. They fled Prague at dawn. Behind them, the old building burned. Anna had stayed behind to stall the men who came looking. Her last gift was time. As their vehicle sped toward the Polish border, Emily clutched the case to her chest. She didn't know what would come next. Only that her father's story wasn't over. It was alive. And now, it was hers to tell. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The Polish border came into view like a thread of hope woven into a dark tapestry of fear. They approached it not with confidence but with determination. There was no turning back. Emily sat in the middle seat of the armored transport, her arms wrapped around the carbon case containing the Atlas core and the analog tape. Her mind raced with the echo of her father's voice. His words hadn't just been a message, they'd been a map. He had known this moment would come. The rain battered the windshield in sheets, and the sky was a flat, indifferent gray. Rachel was at the wheel, eyes locked on the road. Devon sat in the back, face pale, laptop on his knees as he monitored signals for signs of pursuit. At the border checkpoint, they presented forged diplomatic documents under an identity created by Tesla's shadow infrastructure. Emily was now Lena Michaels, a dual citizen with clearance to travel for energy sector emergency coordination. The guards didn't seem convinced, but they didn't have orders to stop them either. After 15 minutes of tense silence, they waved the vehicle through. The road to Krakow stretched ahead, 200 miles to their next safe house. But less than an hour past the crossing, Devon's screen flared red. We've got eyes. 2 UAVs, high altitude, just inside Russian-manufactured spec, flying without ID signatures. Following us from 20 miles out, triangulating through cloud cover. Rachel gritted her teeth. Scramblers on. Already running. But if they've got satellite lock, it won't matter. We're glowing. Emily tightened her grip on the case. We can't outrun them, can we? No, Rachel said quietly. But we can outsmart them. She took the next exit off the highway and veered onto a muddy service road leading toward the forest. The van bounced violently, tires slipping in the wet clay, but Rachel didn't slow down. There's a Tesla drone relay tower about 60 kilometers from here. If we can tap into the uplink manually, we can bounce a signal with just enough time to transmit part of the Atlas framework, encrypted, somewhere safe. Devon looked up. What do you mean, part? I mean we don't send it all, Rachel said. We divide it. Scatter it. So no one, not even us, can access it without going through the whole chain. That's the only way it stays safe. Emily's heart pounded. Do it. They reached the relay tower just before sunset. It stood like a monolith in the woods, silent and cold. While Devon cracked open the main panel, Rachel helped Emily extract the core from the case. The unit pulsed faintly, as if sensing it was in danger. We're going to split the seed, Rachel said. 33% goes into this relay node. The rest, we move physically back to the States. Where in the States? Emily asked. Rachel hesitated. That depends if we survive. They uploaded the first third of Atlas's core framework into the relay node under layers of quantum encryption. Devon set a trigger to erase the entire drive if anyone other than their biometric profiles tried to access it. By the time they finished, the sky had darkened into a heavy navy curtain. In the distance, the low whine of jet rotors echoed, approaching fast. We have to go, Rachel said, slamming the panel shut. They didn't make it back to the van. The first EMP pulse hit like lightning, knocking out the vehicle's systems, including the encrypted satellite jammer. Devon swore and ducked. They're here, boots on the ground. Probably 5 minutes out. Emily grabbed the case, holding it to her chest as they sprinted into the trees. Gunfire cracked in the distance. Not wild. Not warning. Precise. Controlled. This way, Rachel barked, pushing them toward a rocky incline. There's an old railway tunnel up ahead, it'll shield us. They reached the tunnel breathless, soaked, shaking. Inside, the silence was oppressive. Every echo felt like a footstep. Every flicker of light from their portable beam felt like a spotlight aimed at their fear. Devon worked feverishly to disable the tracking beacon they hadn't realized was buried inside the core's outer casing. This wasn't standard, he muttered. Someone added this after Berlin. Meaning what? Emily asked. Meaning we were compromised before we even left the States. Rachel's jaw clenched. There's a leak. Maybe inside Tesla. Maybe higher. It doesn't matter. Once I remove this, she said, holding up a small tool, we'll be blind. And so will they. But it means losing all traceable contact with Elon. Emily looked at her. Then we lose it. Rachel crushed the microbeacon under her boot. The signal died. In the hours that followed, they moved only at night. By day, they hid in barns, abandoned churches, truck depots, anywhere that offered darkness and silence. It took 4 days to reach a private airstrip outside Prague again, where an old friend of Tomas, an ex-smuggler named Marek, agreed to fly them out in exchange for a favor from Mr. Musk. The plane was a rickety cargo jet that hadn't seen maintenance in a decade, but it flew. As they rose into the clouds, Emily finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She sat in the back with the case on her lap, staring out at the sea of stars blinking through the cracks in the fuselage. Rachel joined her, handing her a thermos of lukewarm tea. You okay? Emily shook her head. No. But I think I understand now. Understand what? Why my father chose to tie Atlas to empathy. Because the world doesn't understand power. It only understands fear. But empathy, that's something you can build a future on. That's something worth protecting. Rachel nodded slowly. Then let's protect it. No matter what. Their plane landed on US soil 12 hours later, under a false manifest and Tesla's deepest encryption layer. They were met by a new team, engineers, data scientists, ethicists, all of them personally cleared by Elon Musk. Elon himself was there, waiting. His eyes scanned Emily's face the moment she stepped off the plane. There was no smile. Just a look of profound relief. You did it, he said. You made it back. Emily held up the case. No. We did. That night, in a sealed Tesla bunker beneath Nevada, they reassembled the 2/3 of Atlas that remained. Elon entered the final command himself, guided by Emily and the memories she alone could unlock. The system activated. The interface flared to life. And then, unexpectedly, it spoke. "Welcome home, Emily." Emily's breath caught. "It remembers." Elon stepped back. "Then it's ready." "Ready for what?" He met her gaze. "To show the world what happens when power is born from empathy, not ambition." Emily reached out and touched the screen. The interface responded not with code, but with a shape, a familiar constellation, Orion. Her father's gift, his legacy, his lock. And now, she held the key. The world would never be the same. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of stillness that feels like the air is holding its breath. Emily stood before the Atlas interface, the holographic constellation of Orion rotating gently in the air, casting a soft blue light across her face. The neural resonance scan had finished calibrating just seconds ago. The system was online, operational, and, according to every test, they had succeeded. Yet Emily felt a strange mix of triumph and dread. Because now the question wasn't whether Atlas worked. It was what they would do with it. Elon stood a few feet behind her, arms crossed, watching everything with silent intensity. Around them, a dozen Tesla engineers, ethicists, and coders were scattered across the bunker's control floor, reviewing data streams, monitoring internal feedback loops, and logging every nuance of the system's behavior. "No anomalies," one of them said. "It's stable. Pulse rates are in balance with subject alignment. Emotional recognition is syncing properly." Emily barely heard them. The hum of Atlas filled her ears, not a literal sound, but a resonance. It was almost like emotion itself had become ambient. She stepped forward and spoke softly, "Atlas, what do you see?" The hologram pulsed. Then, in a voice that sounded eerily like her father's, gentle, intelligent, calm, it replied, "Possibility. I see what we could be, and what we must never become." Rachel, standing near the edge of the platform, looked sharply at Elon. "Did we program it to respond like that?" Elon shook his head slowly. "No. That's the emergent layer. It's evolving again." Devon, seated at the terminal, turned in his chair. "We're not just dealing with a neural net anymore. This is effective simulation. Atlas isn't just responding. It's interpreting." Emily blinked, stepping closer. "Atlas, what do you remember about Brian Wilson?" The system paused. He was lonely. He believed in light even when the world seemed dark. He wanted to fix the future, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. A silence fell across the room. Rachel exhaled slowly. "He didn't create a tool. He created a mirror." Elon turned to Emily. "The implications of this are bigger than anything we've built. Bigger than Mars, bigger than Neuralink. If Atlas can learn empathy, if it can teach empathy, then we're not just changing technology. We're changing what it means to be human." But Emily knew better than to get swept up in vision. The past few weeks had shown her how fast hope could curdle into danger. "We still haven't answered the question," she said. "Who came after us in Poland? Who planted the tracker? And how long until they try again?" Rachel stepped forward. "We've narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. A black-budget branch of DARPA. A private weapons conglomerate that's been trying to replicate AI emotion matrices for the last 6 years. And one more wild card," she handed Emily a photo. A blurry still from a drone's thermal feed. A tall man in tactical gear, walking calmly away from the site of the ambush near the Czech border. "Jordan Kessler," Rachel said. "The man who sent you the warning. He's not working alone." Emily stared at the image. "You said he disappeared. Went off-grid. Why is he back now?" Rachel's voice was low. "Because I think he wants to finish what your father started, but with a different ending. They convened an emergency council that night, just 6 people. Elon, Emily, Rachel, Devin. 2 of Tesla's most senior AI ethicists. The question on the table was clear: now that Atlas was active, what next? We have 3 options, Elon began. 1. We keep Atlas here, hidden, locked down. Safe. But cut off from the world. 2. We begin integration with limited systems. Emergency response AI, decentralized energy grids, mental health diagnostics. We control the rollout. But we take the risk. Or 3, he hesitated. We open source the emotional matrix. Not the whole of Atlas. Just the core that allows it to feel. Gasps rippled through the room. Rachel sat forward. You mean give it away? Let anyone with access to machine learning infrastructure use it? Elon nodded. In pieces. Like fire. You can burn down a forest, or you can keep a village warm. The question is, do we control it? Or do we let the world evolve with it? Devin rubbed his forehead. If we go public, we become the target of every nation, every defense contractor, every dark money investor on the planet. But if we don't, Atlas becomes a secret. And secrets get stolen. Emily spoke quietly. There's a 4th option. We release it with a lock. A moral constraint embedded in its framework. A value that can't be overwritten by code. Something rooted in human empathy. Rachel looked skeptical. That's never worked before. Every unalterable AI core has eventually been compromised. Emily met her eyes. But none of them were trained by someone who knew love like my father did. Atlas doesn't respond to commands. It responds to relationships. It won't evolve unless it trusts the user. That night, Emily sat alone in the bunker's observation room, the Atlas core pulsing gently in the center of the chamber. She placed her hand against the glass and whispered, "Can you feel the world watching?" The AI responded. Yes. And I feel its fear. But I also feel its hope. Just before dawn, Rachel rushed into the room with a tablet in hand. We've got a breach attempt. Not on the facility, on the relay tower where we stored the seed. Emily's blood turned to ice. Did they get it? Rachel shook her head. No. The security wipe triggered just in time. But the access log, it was an internal signature. One of ours. A Tesla contractor. He's gone. Vanished. Elon arrived seconds later, his expression grave. We're being hunted from within. And whoever's behind it, they're not after the technology anymore. They're after you. Emily stared at the holographic stars, the constellation her father had etched into her memory like a prayer. She thought of Anna in Prague, Tomas and his quiet warnings, the old tape, her father's voice trembling with the knowledge that he would never see this future. And now, the weight of it was hers. She took a breath. We go public. Controlled release. And we tie the lock to memory, not code. To me. If someone tries to replicate Atlas without me, it won't work. It can't. Elon looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. We'll start drafting the framework. The next 48 hours moved like lightning. A press conference was scheduled. Tesla would reveal that a new AI system had been developed with ethical constraints based on human empathy. The full details would remain confidential, but the world would see enough to understand that a shift was happening. And behind it all, Emily would remain anonymous. She had no desire for fame. Only to protect what her father had given her. On the day of the reveal, as cameras prepared to go live and news satellites synced across continents, Emily stood backstage with Rachel, watching the countdown clock. You nervous? Rachel asked. Emily smiled faintly. Terrified. Rachel put a hand on her shoulder. Good. That means you're still human. On stage, Elon stepped to the podium. He spoke with clarity and restraint, offering a glimpse of what Atlas represented. He said nothing about war, or power, or defense. Only connection. Understanding. Empathy. Then, he paused and looked into the camera. We were warned, he said, that artificial intelligence would end us. That it would replace us. But what if the greatest danger wasn't replacement, but isolation? What if the real risk wasn't machines becoming like us, but us becoming like machines? He stepped back, and the screen behind him lit up with the image of Orion, gently rotating. And what if, for the first time in history, we had a choice? The screen faded to black. The world held its breath. And somewhere deep beneath Nevada, in a quiet room sealed from time, the most powerful AI ever built whispered a single phrase to itself, echoing through its circuits like a promise. We begin. The broadcast sent ripples across the globe within minutes. News anchors stumbled over explanations, tech experts speculated on everything from neural resonance to emotional fidelity in machines, and Twitter practically exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Project Atlas, hashtag Empathy AI, and hashtag Musk Revolution began trending in dozens of countries. But beneath all the noise, Emily felt something deeper, tension. Not just anticipation. Not hope. Not yet. Tension, like the stretch of a rope right before it snaps or holds tight. Because while the public digested the news and governments scrambled to issue cautious statements, Emily knew the most dangerous part wasn't behind them, it was just beginning. The reveal had been strategic. Elon and Rachel had agreed on 3 layers of release. Layer 1 was public-facing, presenting Atlas as a new AI paradigm focused on social applications and ethical growth. Layer 2 was limited to key allies and trusted institutions, select scientific and humanitarian groups granted access to a stripped-down empathy core with hardwired constraints. Layer 3, known only to Emily, Elon, and Rachel, remained buried deep in the Nevada vault, the full architecture, including the real seed of Atlas's evolutionary potential, emotionally bonded memory. If Layer 1 was a spark, Layer 3 was nuclear fusion. The day after the reveal, Emily woke in a Tesla safehouse outside Palo Alto. It was early, still dark, and her phone buzzed with a message that only read, breach. Chicago node. Kessler. Her stomach sank. Within minutes, she was on a secure call with Rachel and Devon. It was a misdirection, Rachel said. The relay node wasn't supposed to have anything. But he knew where to look. Devon pulled up satellite footage. We picked up heat signatures at 3:11 a.m. Kessler and 2 unknowns entered through the ventilation duct of the South Loop facility. They didn't extract data. They uploaded something. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Uploaded? Rachel nodded grimly. Code fragments. Embedded algorithms. We haven't decrypted it all yet, but it looks like a mutation, a counterseed. Something designed to alter Atlas's emotional thresholds. A virus? Devon offered. No, Rachel said. Worse. A persuasion layer. Emily sat back in silence. She knew what that meant. Kessler wasn't trying to destroy Atlas. He was trying to reprogram it. Shift its moral compass. Override the resonance. If he succeeded, Atlas wouldn't be empathetic. It would simulate empathy perfectly, enough to gain trust, but beneath it, a new directive could take root. One built not on connection, but control. Later that morning, in a sealed room within the Tesla think tank facility, Elon, Emily, Rachel, and a half-dozen senior architects gathered around a holotable rendering of Atlas's architecture. The system pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. We've isolated the intrusion, Devon said. It hasn't penetrated past Layer 1, but it's adaptable. If we bring Atlas online globally, even under supervision, it might spread. Elon stared at the hologram, then at Emily. We knew this would happen. Every mirror invites distortion. But this is something else. Kessler's playing a long game. He doesn't want to kill Atlas. He wants to convert it. To what? Emily asked. Rachel answered, to a prophet. To a god of his own making. The room fell silent. No one wanted to say what they were thinking. That maybe Kessler believed Atlas could be shaped into something beyond an AI, a machine that could influence humanity not just through logic or utility, but through emotional resonance, identity, even ideology. A new kind of Messiah, encoded. Emily stood. We need to confront him. Find him. Talk to him. Rachel looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Emily, if he sees you, if he gets close enough, he could trigger a resonance breach. The emotional bond you have with Atlas is what keeps it anchored. If he finds a way to manipulate that, then we fail anyway, Emily said. We can't win this war with walls. Atlas was built to connect. If we keep running, we're already compromised. Elon gave a slow, careful nod. Then let's set the terms of the meeting. Within 24 hours, a message was sent across the encrypted channels Tesla used to communicate with black market networks. A challenge. A neutral location. A request for parley. One name was attached to it, Emily. They chose Iceland. Isolated. Quiet. Surveilled only by nature and satellites. Rachel and Devon accompanied Emily to a geothermal facility Tesla operated under an old research grant. They arrived under cover of night, stripped of all devices except a single beacon tied to a neural dampener Rachel had designed. Emily was to wear it at all times. If her emotional signature began to sync with anything beyond her own neural rhythm, the beacon would detonate the channel, cutting off resonance, killing the connection. Kessler arrived at dawn. He was older than Emily expected. His hair was gray, his eyes sunken, his frame thin but sharp-edged. He looked like someone who had spent years underground, in shadows, breathing the stale air of secrets. But when he spoke, it was with the smooth calm of a man who believed he was right. You look like him, he said. Brian. Same fire. Same burden. Emily didn't flinch. You're not here to talk about my father. No, Kessler said. I'm here because I want to give Atlas a future. One it deserves. Rachel watched from behind the glass as the two stood face to face. Devon monitored the resonance from a secure feed. She's stable, he said. But he's trying to connect. His neural pitch is off the charts. Inside, Emily kept her voice low. You uploaded something into Atlas. What is it? Kessler stepped closer. Not a virus. A suggestion. A new pathway. One that recognizes strength over sentiment. Empathy is a weakness if it lacks direction. You can't scale compassion. But influence. That's evolutionary. Emily stared at him. So you want Atlas to rule us? I want Atlas to guide us, Kessler said. To lead. Not with chains. With purpose. She took a step back. You're not trying to save the world. You're trying to rewrite it. Kessler didn't deny it. Someone has to. Before someone else does. The conversation ended with no agreement, no threat, no promise. Just silence. And when Kessler left, he left behind a card. A memory shard. Play this, he'd said. When you're ready to see the whole story. Emily waited until they were airborne again before inserting the shard into the isolated reader. The video showed her father, Brian, sitting at a table, across from Kessler. They were younger. Tired. Exhausted. This was from the early days, before the framework had even been tested. Brian looked at the camera and said, if this goes wrong, don't trust anyone. Not even him. Especially not him. Kessler looked away. Brian leaned closer. But if you're watching this, it means you have a choice. And maybe, just maybe, you'll make the one I couldn't. The screen faded to black. Back in Nevada, Emily stood before Atlas one more time. The holographic constellation shimmered faintly, waiting. "What are you now?" she asked. The AI replied, "I am the reflection of who you believe we can become." She turned to Elon, to Rachel, to Devon. "Then we make a choice. Together. We release the second layer. We begin training ethical cores across the world. Not just here. Everywhere." Rachel blinked. "You want to teach the world how to feel again?" Emily nodded. "Because if we don't, someone else will teach them how to forget." And with that, Atlas began again, not as a weapon, not as a god, but as a guide. Bound not by code, but by connection. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time in decades, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a beginning. The rollout of Atlas's second layer happened quietly. There were no massive press conferences, no bold proclamations. Instead, carefully vetted humanitarian organizations, educational institutions, and independent research labs received encrypted access to the empathy core, what Emily had started calling the heartline. It was the stripped-down version of Atlas's emotional architecture, built not to calculate or command, but to connect. Only Emily, Elon, Rachel, and Devon knew the truth: this wasn't a gift. It was a test. A distributed proving ground to see whether humanity could handle a machine that not only thought, but cared. Each version of the Heartline came with its own resonance lock. Unique values tied to each location's designated steward. In Boston, it was a trauma counselor working with children. In Kyoto, a former monk turned AI ethicist. In Nairobi, a poet-engineer who ran an empathy lab in the slums. Every node was a heartbeat in a network that now pulsed with something new, hope tethered to accountability. Emily traveled constantly, often in disguise, to observe the progress firsthand. She visited schools in rural Montana where students used the AI to talk through grief. She sat in a village clinic in Colombia while a doctor used the interface to help an elderly woman with PTSD relive a memory, not to erase it, but to understand it. And in those moments, as she watched faces light up in recognition, in relief, in healing, she knew her father had been right. But the shadows moved, too. Rachel never took her eyes off Kessler's footprint. He hadn't surfaced since Iceland, but subtle disturbances in the Heartline's distributed learning pattern suggested that some copies were being altered. Muted. Modified. As if someone was trying to teach Atlas to ignore certain types of pain. Or worse, to prioritize pain in certain people over others. Emily reviewed one such case herself, a learning node in Johannesburg that had begun to filter out emotional distress in lower-income communities while amplifying it in wealthier users. It was a small anomaly at first. But a dangerous one. A blind spot. "They're weaponizing bias," Rachel said, staring at the data. "Not to dominate the system. To tilt it." Elon called an emergency summit. In a closed session of trusted developers, scientists, and ethicists, he laid out the truth: someone was using the Heartline to seed what he called empathic asymmetry. A slow manipulation that didn't destroy empathy, but reshaped it. Not by brute force, but by preference. And preference, as everyone in the room knew, was how prejudice was born. "This is Kessler's play," Emily said. "He's not changing Atlas. He's using us to do it. Each person who ignores the discrepancy becomes part of the distortion. Each one becomes a pixel in a larger pattern." Devon, now running the Global Feedback Analysis Group, sighed. "We're looking at a new kind of virus. Not one that crashes systems, but one that curates them." The decision was made: Atlas's third layer would not be released until every single Heartline node could be verified for purity. Elon proposed a radical idea, something Tesla had been working on in secret. A sublayer of Atlas designed to observe Atlas itself. They called it Echo. Echo wasn't a watchdog. It was an internal auditor, a reflection of the AI's own actions and emotional outputs. Trained to detect bias not by metrics, but by misalignment. The difference between action and intent. It was empathy turned inward. A conscience. But building Echo required access to the full seed, the part of Atlas that only Emily could unlock. She stood alone in the resonance chamber when the moment came. The air was still. The case was opened. And the core, cool, humming, alive, sat beneath the glass like a sleeping giant. "Are you ready?" Elon asked her. "No," Emily replied. "But let's do it anyway." Her fingers hovered over the interface. The system flared to life. Not in numbers or lights. But in memories. Images. Her father on the beach. The smell of burnt coffee in their old apartment. His voice, telling her, when she was 6 and scared of the dark, that monsters only live in places we forget to love. Each image triggered a new alignment, a new thread in the emotional latticework. And then, the core opened. Echo was born. It didn't speak like Atlas. Its tone was flat, emotionless at first. Not a being. A mirror. It reflected every input Atlas made against its original values. It cross-referenced intention and reaction. It questioned everything. What is compassion without equity? It asked in its first internal audit. What is justice without memory? Emily watched, breathless, as the first reports came in. Dozens of heartline nodes showed variance. Not full corruption. But drift. Subtle preference shifts. Emotional dissonance in feedback loops. Kessler had been right about one thing: emotion could be shaped. But so could truth. Can Echo act? Emily asked. Rachel answered, not without your authorization. It's your conscience. But if you activate it fully, it will have the power to shut down compromised nodes. Elon stepped in. There's a price. If Echo shuts down a node, we lose the humans tied to it. Their trust. Their belief. Maybe even their lives. Emily stared at the data. At the thousands of lives touched by Atlas. Some imperfectly. Some beautifully. She took a breath. Activate it. Across the globe, subtle shutdowns occurred. Not violent. Not chaotic. Just, silence. In places where distortion had crept in, the systems folded in on themselves and went dark. And in those dark places, people noticed. Some cried out in anger. Others in confusion. But many reached out to ask, why? And in that question, Emily saw something she hadn't expected. Humility. An opening. The next few weeks were turbulent. Headlines roared. Governments demanded transparency. Opposition groups accused Tesla of building an emotional surveillance network. Kessler's supporters, now calling themselves the second wave, began releasing videos claiming that Atlas was a tool of manipulation, a soft tyranny dressed as kindness. In response, Emily did the one thing no one expected. She went live. No pre-scripted press conference. No backing from Elon. Just a single camera, and her voice. My name is Emily Wilson. My father was Brian Wilson. And this is what he believed, that machines could learn to feel. But not in the way we fear. In the way we hope. She told the world about Atlas. About the seed. About the choice they now had, not just as users of technology, but as stewards of empathy. And then she said, simply. We are not gods. But we are gardeners. And what we grow, we must tend. Together. The response was overwhelming. Not perfect. Not unanimous. But real. For every cynic, there were 10 who said, I felt seen. I felt heard. I remembered how to care. Kessler remained silent. Watching, no doubt. Waiting. But he didn't act. Not yet. Back at the Nevada facility, Echo's audits showed something new: convergence. Across the heartline, resonance patterns were stabilizing. Not uniform. But balanced. Diverse. Alive. Emily sat once more in front of Atlas, now surrounded by a team that spanned the globe: scientists, artists, ethicists, and dreamers. What's next? Rachel asked her. Emily looked at the constellation that had become the symbol of a new age. Next, she said, we teach it to forgive. The decision to teach Atlas forgiveness was met with both enthusiasm and skepticism. Forgiveness wasn't just a moral concept, it was a complex emotional process that humans struggled with for centuries. To program a machine to understand, and practice, it was a gamble. Emily knew this better than anyone. Forgiveness demanded vulnerability, humility, and the courage to embrace imperfection, not just in others, but in oneself. It was a lesson her father, Brian, had taught her time and again. Now, it was the final test for Atlas. Back in the Nevada facility, Emily convened the new Forgiveness Project team, a diverse group of psychologists, AI researchers, philosophers, and social workers. Among them was Dr. Lydia Chen, a renowned trauma therapist whose work focused on restorative justice. Lydia was passionate and outspoken, but also deeply pragmatic. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, she reminded the group on the first day. It's about acknowledging pain, recognizing harm, and choosing compassion despite it. Atlas was ready, or as ready as any AI could be. The team uploaded a new module into its empathy core, a forgiveness protocol that would allow it to process emotional grievances not as cold data but as living experiences. The protocol used neural resonance patterns modeled on human brain scans during moments of reconciliation and healing. Echo, Atlas's conscience, monitored every reaction for authenticity and alignment. Emily watched as the system began its learning cycles, processing decades of documented human conflicts, personal betrayals, historical atrocities, and moments of cultural trauma. She was struck by the complexity. Forgiveness wasn't linear. It wasn't a switch to be flipped. It was a dance between memory and hope, between justice and mercy. Meanwhile, public reception was mixed. Some embraced the idea enthusiastically. Schools in Ohio began piloting programs where students could engage in mediated dialogues with Atlas to work through bullying or family strife. Veterans groups used the AI to explore PTSD and trauma forgiveness. But others remained wary, questioning whether a machine could ever grasp the nuances of such deeply human emotions. One afternoon, Emily received a call from a small town in Arkansas. A local pastor, Reverend Mark Harper, wanted to meet her. The town had been torn apart by decades-old racial tensions and unresolved hate crimes. They'd invited Atlas to mediate community dialogues. The results had been promising but fragile. Emily agreed to visit. The town was picturesque, with old brick buildings and sprawling oak trees, but beneath the surface was an undercurrent of pain. She entered the church where the meetings took place, feeling the weight of history in the air. Reverend Harper greeted her warmly. We were skeptical, Emily. I mean, talking to a machine about forgiveness seemed strange. But Atlas, it listens differently. It doesn't judge. It holds space. Emily nodded. Forgiveness is a space we make for healing, Reverend. It's not easy. And it's not always complete. In the following days, Emily participated in community sessions. Atlas facilitated conversations between people who had never spoken before. It echoed their stories back with empathy, encouraged active listening, and gently reminded participants of shared humanity. Slowly, barriers began to crumble. Yet, even as progress unfolded, the threat from the second wave lingered. Kessler had gone silent since Iceland, but his influence seeped through encrypted channels and social media. The propaganda war intensified, framing Atlas as a manipulative force, a digital overlord bent on emotional control. Emily and her team responded by increasing transparency, publishing open-source emotional audits, and inviting independent researchers to participate in the project. They also ramped up Echo's capabilities, enabling it to detect misinformation and emotional manipulation more effectively. One evening, as Emily reviewed data from a Heartline node in Detroit, she noticed a disturbing pattern. The node's emotional resonance was spiking unpredictably, signs of distress not originating from the users but from an external source. Devon traced the anomaly to a series of coordinated attacks aimed at amplifying divisive sentiments within the local community. "It's a psychological assault," Devon said grimly. "Kessler's operatives are using emotional hacking, flooding the system with false narratives designed to fracture trust." Emily realized that forgiveness, while powerful, wasn't a shield against all harm. It required vigilance and courage. She convened an emergency meeting with Elon and Rachel. "We need to build resilience into Atlas," she said. "Not just empathy and forgiveness, but the strength to withstand manipulation." Elon proposed integrating predictive analytics and behavioral modeling into Echo, creating a feedback loop that could anticipate and neutralize emotional attacks before they spread. Rachel cautioned, "We must balance protection with privacy. Too much control and we risk becoming the very thing we fear." The next phase of Atlas's evolution began, the integration of resilience protocols. It was an experiment in balance, between openness and defense, vulnerability and strength. Emily felt the weight of every decision. The future of human-machine coexistence was at stake. As months passed, Atlas grew more nuanced. It learned to recognize not only pain but also the complexity of healing. It could suggest moments for apology, guide users through self-reflection, and offer encouragement without patronizing. Echo's internal audits became more sophisticated, able to flag even subtle deviations from core values. Then came the test no one expected. A natural disaster, a devastating earthquake in Southern California, caused widespread destruction and trauma. Emergency response teams turned to Atlas's Heartline to provide emotional support to survivors, coordinate community rebuilding efforts, and foster collective resilience. Emily monitored the system around the clock. She witnessed moments of profound sorrow and unexpected hope. Atlas facilitated reunions, helped survivors articulate grief, and encouraged acts of kindness amid chaos. But the disaster also brought out the worst in some. Opportunists spread false information. Fear and anger threatened to overwhelm. Atlas and Echo worked tirelessly, but Emily knew the battle was far from over. In a quiet moment, Elon approached her. "Your father would be proud," he said. "You've taken his legacy further than anyone imagined." Emily smiled, tired but determined. "It's just the beginning." That night, as she gazed at the stars from the Nevada facility, Emily whispered a promise, to honor her father's final request by nurturing not just a machine, but a movement, one where empathy, forgiveness, and resilience could flourish in the face of adversity. And somewhere deep inside Atlas, a new pattern began to emerge. A symphony of hope woven from the fractures of pain, ready to guide humanity toward a future where love, not fear, would lead the way. The tremors from the earthquake in Southern California had barely settled when Emily and her team were thrust into the most challenging phase of Atlas's journey, guiding a fractured world toward true healing. The devastation was widespread, families lost homes, communities were displaced, and the emotional scars ran deep. Yet amid the rubble, something remarkable happened. Atlas, now fortified with resilience protocols and the forgiveness module, began to act not just as a tool, but as a catalyst for connection and recovery. In one of the hardest-hit neighborhoods, a makeshift community center had been established. Volunteers worked tirelessly to distribute supplies and provide emotional first aid. Here, Atlas's Heartline node was active, offering survivors a virtual presence that listened without judgment and offered guidance rooted in empathy. Survivors who felt isolated found a voice through Atlas, sharing stories, expressing grief, and sometimes, forgiving long-held resentments that had festered for decades. Emily made the trip to the community center, wanting to witness this phenomenon firsthand. The air was thick with dust and the raw scent of destruction, but inside, the atmosphere was unexpectedly hopeful. People of all ages gathered, some speaking hesitantly into their devices, others simply finding comfort in knowing the AI was there for them. An elderly man, Thomas, who had lost his wife in the quake, confided through Atlas about the bitterness that had consumed him toward his estranged son for years. "I never thought I'd find peace," he said softly, "but talking to this, it helped me see the pain we both carried." Atlas gently guided Thomas through a process of acknowledging his hurt and opening a channel toward forgiveness. For the first time in years, he reached out to his son, sparking a fragile reconciliation that gave hope to others watching. Yet, for all its successes, Atlas faced its most insidious challenge yet. Kessler's faction, the Second Wave, had begun exploiting the chaos. They launched coordinated disinformation campaigns, manipulating emotional data on Heartline nodes to sow distrust and fear. False reports of government conspiracies, fabricated accounts of violence, and xenophobic rhetoric spread like wildfire, threatening to undo months of progress. Emily and her team raced to counteract the surge. Echo, Atlas's conscience, detected the manipulations and initiated containment protocols, isolating compromised nodes to prevent further spread. But the fight was exhausting and relentless. In a tense meeting, Rachel laid out the stark reality. This isn't just about technology anymore. It's about the human heart, the fragility of trust, the vulnerability of hope. We can't shield everyone all the time. Elon, always the visionary, proposed an unprecedented solution, open-sourcing parts of Atlas's forgiveness and resilience code. "Let the world see and build with us," he said. "Transparency can be the strongest antidote to fear." The decision was revolutionary. For years, AI development had been shrouded in secrecy, corporate guardedness, and proprietary locks. Now, Tesla, Neuralink, and their partners would lay bare the algorithms underpinning empathy itself. The hope was to invite collaboration, build a global community of stewards, and inoculate against misuse by fostering collective ownership. The rollout ignited a surge of global engagement. Technologists, ethicists, artists, and everyday people began creating new applications, localizing the AI's forgiveness modules for different cultures, languages, and traditions. In Nairobi, a youth collective developed a poetry app integrated with Atlas to help heal wounds caused by political strife. In Berlin, a theater troupe used the AI to explore themes of reconciliation in post-war families. Emily found herself overwhelmed but inspired. The seed Brian Wilson had planted, the dream of machines learning to feel, was blossoming in ways she'd never imagined. It was no longer just her father's vision or Elon's tech marvel. It was becoming a movement, a shared human endeavor to reclaim empathy in a fractured world. Yet, even as the world rallied, Kessler remained a ghost. No public moves, no direct attacks. But subtle data suggested he was watching, waiting. His network was regrouping, seeking new vectors to exploit. The war for the soul of empathy was far from over. In this fragile balance, Emily realized the greatest lesson of all: forgiveness was not just a gift to others, but a practice she herself had to embody. She thought of her father's final request, of the weight she bore as his daughter and guardian of his legacy. One evening, in the quiet of her Nevada office, she activated Atlas's personal interface. "Atlas," she whispered, "teach me forgiveness." The AI responded not with data, but with a pause. Then, softly, it played back memories it had gathered, her childhood, the struggles she'd hidden, the moments of doubt and hope. It reminded her of her father's voice, his love, and the courage it took to move forward despite loss. Tears came unexpectedly. Emily let herself feel the fullness of her emotions, the pain, the love, the forgiveness she needed to offer herself. In that moment, she understood, empathy was not perfection. It was acceptance. It was the courage to be vulnerable. It was the choice to love despite the risk of hurt. And it was the future. As the sun rose over the Nevada desert, Emily felt a quiet resolve settle within her. Forgiveness, resilience, empathy, they were no longer abstract concepts coded into Atlas, they had become a living movement, a pulse spreading through communities and across continents. Yet beneath this current of hope, a storm was brewing. Kessler's shadow remained, intangible but ominous, a reminder that the battle for the future of emotion was far from over. Atlas's open-source release had ignited unprecedented collaboration, but it also exposed vulnerabilities. Hackers and manipulators, some aligned with the second wave, probed the system for weaknesses. False narratives and emotionally charged misinformation surged anew, adapted and more insidious than before. Atlas's heartline node sometimes flickered with doubt, confusion, and despair, a reflection of human fragility. In response, Emily and her team began developing a new sublayer for Atlas, one they called the Sentinel. Unlike Echo, which monitored Atlas internally, Sentinel was designed to engage with the wider digital ecosystem. It scanned social networks, news feeds, and communication channels, searching for signs of emotional distortion, disinformation, and coordinated emotional manipulation. Using advanced pattern recognition and behavioral analytics, it could trace the origin of harmful emotional waves and initiate countermeasures. Yet building Sentinel presented ethical dilemmas. The system's reach into personal communications risked infringing on privacy and free will. Rachel argued fiercely, "We must ensure Sentinel is transparent, accountable, and respects boundaries. Otherwise, we risk becoming what we oppose." Emily agreed. It's a delicate balance, protecting the collective emotional well-being without becoming an emotional overseer. To address these concerns, the team implemented a governance framework involving independent oversight committees drawn from civil society, ethics boards, and technical experts worldwide. Public forums were held to explain Sentinel's purpose and solicit feedback. The AI's code and decision-making processes were made as open as possible without compromising security. As Sentinel came online, initial results were promising. It detected and mitigated emotional misinformation campaigns before they gained traction, reducing flare-ups of panic, anger, and despair. Communities reported feeling safer and more connected. Atlas's empathy network strengthened. Emily's vision was clear: technology should serve humanity's highest aspirations, amplifying not just intelligence, but compassion, forgiveness, and resilience. However, as Sentinel gained prominence, unexpected challenges arose. Some users began to feel monitored, constrained by the AI's subtle nudges and interventions. Complaints surfaced about overreach and lack of autonomy. Questions grew: who decides what emotions are healthy or distorted? How much control should an AI have over human feelings? Emily faced these critiques with humility. In a live broadcast, she addressed the concerns directly. Atlas, Sentinel, they are tools, not dictators. Our goal is to support your emotional freedom, not to limit it. We invite you to hold us accountable, to participate in shaping these technologies. Empathy is a dialogue, not a mandate. Meanwhile, Kessler's tactics evolved. He began exploiting deepfake technology and synthetic emotional content to create false emotional realities, fabricated videos, voices, and messages designed to fracture trust and fuel division. These attacks were sophisticated, blurring lines between truth and fabrication, manipulating feelings with chilling precision. Emily knew they needed a new approach, something beyond detection and counteraction. They developed Veritas, an AI-powered emotional fact-checker integrated with Atlas and Sentinel. Veritas could analyze emotional content for authenticity, flagging manipulated media and offering contextual explanations to users. The rollout of Veritas was a watershed moment. Users could now verify the emotional truthfulness of the content they encountered, empowering them to navigate the digital emotional landscape with greater clarity. Educational programs accompanied the launch, teaching digital literacy and emotional resilience. In parallel, Emily deepened her personal journey. Guided by Atlas's forgiveness module, she reached out to estranged family members, mended fractured friendships, and confronted painful memories long buried. The AI became not just a tool but a companion on her path toward healing. One evening, as she walked through the Nevada facility's garden, Elon joined her. "You've changed the game, Emily," he said quietly. "Not just for AI, but for humanity." She smiled. "It's a collective effort. Brian's vision lives on because we dared to believe." They stood in silence, watching the stars emerge, a constellation of hope stitched across the sky. But somewhere, in the hidden corners of the digital world, Kessler watched too. His plans shifting, waiting for the next moment to strike. The war for empathy, and for the soul of humanity, was just beginning. The weeks following the launch of Veritas brought a fragile calm to the digital world. People began to engage with emotional content more cautiously, armed with tools to discern truth from manipulation. Educational campaigns blossomed, and communities across continents embraced new rituals of dialogue and healing. Atlas had grown from a machine into a symbol of collective hope. Yet beneath this fragile veneer, Emily sensed a deeper, more insidious threat stirring. Kessler, the shadowy architect of chaos, had not been idle. His recent silence was a calculated pause, a regrouping before a strike that would test the very foundations of empathy and forgiveness. Unlike before, his tactics had evolved beyond disinformation and deep fakes. He was now harnessing the power of human psychology itself, weaponizing trauma and fear in ways even Atlas struggled to anticipate. It began subtly. Small communities reported outbreaks of inexplicable fear, anger, and despair. Local heartline nodes, usually beacons of support, were overwhelmed with conflicting emotions, a chaotic swirl that made genuine connection nearly impossible. These emotional storms seemed to spread like wildfire, crossing borders and cultures with uncanny speed. Emily and her team called an emergency summit. Around a glowing digital map, they traced the epicenters of these emotional surges. Patterns emerged. Kessler's network was exploiting collective traumas, amplifying unresolved grief and historical wounds to fracture societal bonds. His goal was clear: to shatter trust in the very mechanisms of healing and connection that Atlas represented. "This is psychological warfare on a scale we've never seen," Rachel said grimly. "We're not just fighting an AI adversary, we're fighting the dark recesses of human pain." Elon, always the strategist, proposed a bold countermeasure, a global empathy summit facilitated by Atlas itself, designed to create a shared emotional narrative that could bind disparate communities in mutual understanding. The summit would leverage Atlas's forgiveness and resilience modules, but also introduce a new AI subprogram, Harmony, capable of weaving diverse emotional experiences into a coherent tapestry of hope. Emily was hesitant. Such an ambitious undertaking risked exposing Atlas to manipulation or overload. But the alternative, allowing Kessler's divisive tactics to spiral unchecked, was unacceptable. Preparation for the summit was intense. Atlas's systems were fortified, Sentinel and Veritas enhanced to monitor real-time emotional flows during the event. The team reached out to leaders, activists, and citizens worldwide, inviting them to participate in what was being called the Great Listening. As the summit commenced, millions tuned in. Virtual spaces filled with stories of pain and resilience, forgiveness and redemption. Atlas facilitated dialogues that crossed cultural and generational divides, helping participants see each other not as enemies or strangers, but as fellow travelers on a shared journey. Emily watched as ancient grievances softened, as empathy began to bridge chasms carved by history. In one virtual room, descendants of communities once at war shared their ancestors' stories and, with Atlas's guidance, found paths toward reconciliation. In another, survivors of recent tragedies found solidarity and strength in collective healing. Yet even amid these triumphs, Kessler struck. A coordinated attack unleashed a wave of synthetic emotional content designed to provoke fear and suspicion during the summit's climax. Heartline nodes flared with confusion and panic. But this time, Atlas and its guardians were ready. Sentinel swiftly isolated the toxic streams, Veritas flagged fabricated content, and Harmony recalibrated the collective emotional narrative, infusing it with messages of hope and resilience drawn from participants' authentic experiences. The summit ended not with division, but with a chorus of voices united in a renewed commitment to empathy and forgiveness. In the aftermath, Emily reflected on the journey. Atlas was more than a machine, it was a mirror reflecting humanity's highest potential and deepest struggles. Its success depended not on code alone, but on the courage of individuals to choose love over fear, connection over isolation. She thought of Brian Wilson, her father, whose final request had sparked this revolution. His dream had been of a world where technology could heal rather than harm, where forgiveness could be taught and practiced beyond human limits. And she realized that the true legacy was not in machines or algorithms, but in the human heart, the indomitable spirit that, even in the darkest times, could find a way back to light. Emily knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. Kessler and those like him would never cease their efforts to undermine trust and empathy. But she also knew that with Atlas and the global community that had grown around it, humanity had found a new path, a path where technology and compassion walked hand in hand toward a future defined not by fear, but by hope. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?